At the dawn of the 4th century, the Roman Empire was tearing itself apart. It was a sprawling, violent and chaotic world, ruled by 4 rival emperors in a system called the Tetrarchy, which had basically devolved into a series of brutal civil wars. In this landscape, being a Christian was a death sentence. The faith was a persecuted minority, hunted and terrorized by the most powerful state on earth. It was called the Great Persecution. Unleashed by Emperor Diocletian in 303 AD, it was the most savage crackdown in Roman history. Edicts went out: destroy Christian churches, burn their scriptures, and seize their property. Clergy were arrested, and every citizen was ordered to sacrifice to the Roman gods or face torture and death. Christians were thrown to wild beasts in the arena, burned alive and crucified. It really seemed like the faith was about to be wiped out by imperial Rome. But one battle, one vision, and one man were about to change the course of history. The story goes that on the eve of a battle he was almost certain to lose, a Roman general named Constantine looked up at the sky and saw a cross of light with the words, "In this sign conquer." He took the sign, won the battle, and the victory didn't just give him the imperial throne, it set in motion the transformation of Christianity from a hunted cult into the dominant religion of the Western world. But is that what really happened? Was this a divine miracle, or was it one of the most brilliant and cynical political moves in all of history? The answer would go on to shape the next 2,000 years. To really get the weight of this moment, you have to understand the world Constantine was living in. The Roman Empire was in a full-blown crisis. The Tetrarchy, Diocletian's 4-emperor system, fell apart almost as soon as he abdicated in 305 AD, kicking off a bloody scramble for power. Constantine, whose father was the emperor in the West, was declared emperor by his troops in York, Britain in 306, but his claim was just one of many. His main rival in the West was a man named Maxentius, who had taken control of Italy and Rome itself. The empire was a tangled mess of conspiracies and wannabe emperors. At one point, no fewer than 6 different men were all claiming the top job of Augustus. And in the middle of all this political chaos, the Great Persecution was still raging, especially in the eastern provinces. It was a systematic effort to stamp out Christianity for good. The first edict in 303 AD ordered churches and scriptures destroyed. Later edicts had the clergy imprisoned and tortured. Finally, a 4th edict in 304 demanded that every single citizen make a public sacrifice to the old Roman gods or die. Now, how strictly this was enforced depended on where you were. Constantine's own father was pretty lenient in Gaul and Britain. But the message was crystal clear. The state saw Christianity as a threat that had to be eliminated. This was the world Constantine wanted to rule, an empire at war with itself and a state at war with a faith that just wouldn't die. The stakes couldn't have been higher for Rome and for Christianity. In the spring of 312 AD, Constantine made his move. He gathered his army, invaded Italy and marched on Rome to take out Maxentius. After winning a few key battles up north, he headed for the capital. Maxentius, who had a bigger army and was feeling confident thanks to a prophecy that an enemy of the Romans will perish, on October 28th, decided to meet Constantine in an open battle instead of hiding behind Rome's walls. He made his stand at the Milvian Bridge, a key bridge on the Tiber River leading into the city. This is where the story takes a legendary turn. We have 2 main ancient accounts of what happened next, from the Christian writers Lactantius and Eusebius. Lactantius, writing closer to the events, says that on the night before the battle, Constantine was told in a dream to delineate the heavenly sign on the shields of his soldiers. He describes this sign as the Chi-Rho, the first 2 letters of Christ's name in Greek, which Constantine's troops then painted on their shields. Eusebius, who claims he got the story straight from an older Constantine himself, tells an even more spectacular version. He says that before the battle, around noon, Constantine and his entire army saw a cross of light above the sun, with the Greek words en touto Nika, or in this sign, conquer. Then, that night, Christ supposedly appeared to Constantine in a dream and told him to make a copy of the sign to use as his battle standard. On October 28, 312 AD, the armies clashed. Constantine's smaller but more experienced force charged. Maxentius's army was quickly pushed back towards the river, and their retreat became a complete disaster. A temporary bridge they had built collapsed under the weight of their own fleeing soldiers, throwing hundreds into the Tiber. Maxentius himself was one of them. He drowned in the chaos. The next day, Constantine entered Rome as a hero. The head of his rival was paraded through the streets. He had won. He was now the sole ruler of the Western Roman Empire, and he was convinced the Christian God had handed him the victory. Constantine's victory at the Milvian Bridge wasn't just a military win. It kicked off a religious revolution. The immediate effects were massive and completely changed what it meant to be a Christian in the Roman Empire. The first thing to go was the Great Persecution. Just a few months later, in February 313 AD, Constantine met with the Eastern Emperor Licinius in Milan. Together they issued a landmark proclamation that we now call the Edict of Milan. This wasn't just a simple, let's tolerate them statement. The policy granted total freedom for anyone to worship any god they wanted. It specifically gave Christians legal rights, including the right to organize churches. And crucially, it ordered the immediate return of all property, churches, cemeteries, you name it, that had been seized during the persecutions. For the first time ever, Christianity was a legally recognized and protected religion. But Constantine didn't stop at just making it legal. He became the church's greatest patron. The emperor who used to worship Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, started pouring imperial money into the Christian faith. He funded the construction of incredible basilicas, like the first St. Peter's in Rome and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. He gave clergy special privileges, like tax exemptions, and started promoting Christians to high-ranking government jobs. The cross, once a symbol of a shameful criminal's execution, was now stamped on the standards of the Roman army. For Christians who, just months before, were hiding for their lives, this was a jaw-dropping, miraculous turn of events. The change from a hunted sect to an imperially favored religion happened at lightning speed. It raises huge questions, not just about faith, but about how power really works. If you're fascinated by these moments where history turns on a dime, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories that shaped our world. With Christianity now legal and fashionable, Constantine ran into a new problem he probably didn't expect. The church wasn't united at all. It was filled with bitter arguments over theology. The biggest one was the Arian controversy, a huge debate in the East about the nature of Christ. A priest named Arius was teaching that Christ was a created being and not co-eternal with God the Father. His opponents called this a dangerous heresy, and the fight threatened to split the church, which in turn could cause chaos in the empire. Constantine's solution? Use his imperial power to force everyone to agree. In 325 AD, he called together the First Council of Nicaea, bringing bishops from all over the empire. The emperor, who hadn't even been baptized himself, personally opened the council and pushed the bishops to settle the argument. The council ended up condemning Arianism and produced the Nicene Creed, a statement of faith that declared the Father and Son were homoousios, or of one substance. It was the first time an emperor had directly stepped in to define Christian belief, forever tangling the power of the state with the business of the church. His second major act was founding a new capital. In 330 AD, he dedicated the old city of Byzantium as New Rome, which everyone soon started calling Constantinople. He imagined it as a Christian capital, free of the pagan baggage of old Rome. He filled it with stunning churches, while very deliberately not building any new pagan temples. But this all leads to the big complication, the debate that historians still argue about. Was Constantine a true believer or a political genius? Skeptics point out that for years after his conversion, his coins still had images of his old patron, Sol Invictus. The Arch of Constantine, built to celebrate his victory, has no obvious Christian symbols on it, and he waited until he was on his deathbed to actually get baptized. Was he just using the energy and organization of this fast-growing religion to unify his empire? On the other hand, his supporters argue his actions speak louder than coins. He didn't have to pour a fortune into the church or give it legal protection. He didn't have to personally get involved in their theological fights. Maybe, like a lot of people in that changing world, his faith was just complicated, a mix of old and new ideas. He might have seen the Christian God as the ultimate divine patron, a fulfillment of his search for a single supreme deity. Saint or sinner, true believer or master pragmatist, in the end, the result of Constantine's vision was the same. One man's experience on the eve of a battle and the political choices he made after put Christianity on a one-way path. It transformed a marginal, persecuted faith into the foundation of a new Christian Roman Empire. While it wouldn't become the official state religion until Emperor Theodosius made it so in 380 AD, this was the moment the fuse was lit. The line between church and state, once drawn in the blood of martyrs, was now permanently blurred. This new alliance of imperial power and religious authority would define the next 1,000 years of Western history, creating the world that allowed Christianity to become the global power it is today. What Constantine saw in the sky is a great story, but the real question is what he saw in the future.